In Spain, the missionaries did not stop. They used whatever influence they had to show the Spanish authorities their documents, to write to the Spanish king and his counselors, especially those in charge of the mission affairs. This would be the colonial affairs. And these people who had some power anyway in terms of legislation and governance over what happened on the matter of slavery in the colonies. The Spanish authorities on the civil side of things really weren't interested in doing anything. They just wanted it to quiet down. Church authorities took it somewhat more seriously. So, for instance, the papal nuncio in Spain, in Madrid, as a matter of fact, looked at the document that we're talking about, Epifanio's document, and looked on it favorably. And he forwarded it to the Vatican itself, where it was put in the hands of people in the Congregation for the Propaganda of the Faith, the mission office of the Catholic Church in Rome. The people who were involved in high levels of governance of the order to take up the cause. And as it turned out, there was an Italian noble who had joined the order. Because of his background connections with nobility in Italy, he had a lot of contacts, and he tried to use that to instigate interest in the Vatican in this whole matter. Now, that kind of networking and pressure and lobbying takes a lot of time, and these two people, the missionaries, were restricted in their movements. But eventually they did go to Rome, and they personally presented their case to people in the Vatican. And about 4 years later, so this would be in the mid-1680s, the Congregation for the Propagation of the Faith absolved the missionaries from any wrongdoing. They threw out the order of the bishop of excommunication, and the Congregation of the Propagation of the Faith officially sent to all the Spanish colonies a directive that there was a problem with slavery and that the local bishop should look into it. And this apparently was based, in at least part, on the efforts and the writings of these two missionaries. Let's take a moment now to reevaluate what the missionaries accomplished. They did manage to make their case. They wrote down their thoughts and arguments in the manuscripts. They disseminated their ideas among civil and church authorities. And as far as the church authorities went, they managed to get some action out of the Congregation for the Propagation of the Faith, instructing the local bishops in the colonies to start examining slavery because there was a problem with the system of slavery. But what happened to that directive was typical of the time because of the distance between the Vatican in Rome and the colonies spread all over the Western hemisphere. The bishops, local bishops, were able to ignore what the Vatican was telling them and basically to continue business as usual in terms of the system of slavery. And this lasted pretty much through the whole colonial period. But maybe not. I became interested in this story When I came across copies of the manuscripts, not the originals, but translations of the Latin into Spanish and a transliteration of the original Spanish of the second document, the Resolucion, which is Francisco Jose's work, in a library at the University of Florida in Gainesville. And I was struck by what these two men had tried to do. Imagining they take on the Spanish colonial empire, knowing that they had few resources, little power, they didn't control armies, they couldn't force their way to what they considered a matter of justice, but they used moral persuasion as an attempt to try to speak to the consciences of these people in charge who did have some power to change the system of slavery. They also tried to get church authorities, fellow believers in the religion, and actually people who have dedicated their lives to working with people in the practice of their faith, and to get them to take a more critical view of the system that they actually participated in themselves. They were more successful with church authorities than they were with civil authorities, but even with church authorities, there wasn't a lasting change, even within the church, even though the authorities started asking questions that hadn't really been asked before. In fact, it wasn't until the late 19th century, so this would be 200 years after the time that we're talking about in these manuscripts, that a pope, this would be Leo the 13th, came out and officially condemned slavery. He did this when Brazil, which was the last republic in the Americas, was about to officially condemn slavery from the perspective of a civil government. And so Leo the 13th apparently wanted to get in under the wire with a church condemnation, so the church wasn't left to be the last one. That year, when Brazil finally condemned slavery, the last American former colony, present republic, did that was 1888.